Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. In Jeremy Bentham's posthumously published Offenses Against Oneself, which is a part of a larger work, which we're going to reference momentarily, one of the questions that he's going to raise with respect to same-sex relations is, does it actually make sense to punish or prohibit these, and what's the motive for doing so? And he is going to zero in on one in particular, which he calls antipathy. And so this is actually a portion that didn't get published in one of his major works, which is the Introduction to the Principles of Morals and Legislation. And he talks about antipathy in the section on motives, which are incredibly important for Bentham's utilitarian moral theory. So a motive is something more than just an intention. It's something that runs throughout a person or even institutions' decision-making in general. And what he calls antipathy, the way that he understands it, it is an antisocial motive, he calls it, because it takes pain in somebody else's pleasure, or it takes pleasure in somebody else's pain. So there's a lot of things that could fall under this. For example, if you're motivated by rage all the time and you want to punish people or hurt them or take revenge on them for imagined slights or insults or humiliations, well, you're probably motivated by antipathy. If you're just a plain cold sadist, you're also motivated by antipathy. If you're always on the lookout to find reasons to hurt other people, to impede them, to prevent their happiness, well, that's a motive of antipathy. And so, if we think about reasons for punishing same-sex male relationships, right, homosexual relationships, he runs through several different possibilities. One, which he talked about a little bit earlier, is this notion that by engaging in same-sex relationships, men are in effect robbing women of their opportunities for sexual companionship and enjoyment. And he says that, this is really not a genuine concern. He talked about that at length earlier, but he says, even if it was, it doesn't actually make sense that we should make use of punishment for that purpose, much less that we're right to employ the very severe punishments commonly in use. So that's kind of a non-starter right there. What about what he's going to call the mischief or mischievousness? And by that, he doesn't mean sort of a low grade being, naughty or something like that. He means actual harm accruing to other people. So he says, when the punishment is so severe, death in many cases, while the mischief of the offense is so remote and even problematical, one cannot but suspect that the inducements which govern are not the same with those that are avowed. So what does that mean? People are saying we're outlawing and punishing homosexuality because of its damaging character, and Bentham is saying, I don't really buy that. There's another reason why you're doing this. We've seen that it doesn't actually cause any primary or secondary mischief. So what could it be? Well, antipathy is another possibility. So he's going to talk about antipathy as being the ground for this. And he says, in this case, as in so many other cases, the disposition to punish seems to have had no other ground than the antipathy with which persons who had punishment at their disposal, so people who can punish, regarded the offender. And he says, we should actually look at what the specific dynamics, or as he's going to call it, circumstances from which this antipathy may have taken its rise. Let's dig into those. So he talks first about physical antipathy. He also uses the word aversion. What does he mean by this? Well, I'm not interested in same-sex relations. I'm interested in the opposite sex. So I see same-sex relations as something that would be unpleasant for me or painful for me, probably in a sense of promoting disgust or grossness. And so therefore I project that onto other people. And he says, if a person likes eating roadkill, that's very extraordinary. What much good it may do him. What is this to me so long as I can indulge myself with fresh meat? So if we're actually thinking this through, this is something that came up during the gay marriage discussions here in the United States. People are like, what do you care, you heterosexual married people, if other people who are same-sex get married? How does that affect you in any way whatsoever? And people brought up all sorts of things like, well, it changes the sanctity of marriage and it cheapens mine. And the right response to that is, look at this rationally. It doesn't affect you at all. If somebody is into one thing and you're not into that thing, and they're not preventing you from being into the thing that you're into, it doesn't harm you at all. And so he says, from a person possessing a thorough aversion to a practice, the transition is but too natural to wishing to see all others punished who give into it. And he says, this is not unique to sexuality. Look the world over, we'll find that differences in point of taste and opinion are grounds of animosity as frequent and violent as any opposition in point of interest. To disagree with our taste and to oppose our opinions is to wound our sympathetic feelings and affront our pride. And he uses the example of a king, right? James I of England doesn't like the Anabaptists, makes sure that they get burned. He hates tobacco smoking. He can't burn up the tobacco smokers, so he writes a book about why they're so awful, right? And from, a utilitarian perspective, or really any sort of rational perspective, you could be like, you don't like smoking? Is it affecting you? I mean, we could say secondhand smoke and all that. Back then, they didn't know about that. And if it's not, well, then mind your own damn business. It's not your business. So that's one thing. Then he talks about two other closely related dynamics, philosophical pride and envy. So he says philosophical pride employed itself in setting people quarreling with whatever's pleasurable to themselves. So if it's something that I like, but I don't like the fact that I like that pleasure, I don't want to acknowledge it. I have a certain pride. Oh, I'm above all that sort of thing. And so then if somebody else is doing it, well, you don't like that. So maybe if you're a man and you're attracted to men, you don't want to acknowledge that, and so you have to be willing to punish it. Envy, you just don't like other people having a good time, right? So he says, envy will be disposing them to quarrel with what appears to be pleasurable to others. So, you could be in a heterosexual marriage, and you're like, look at those gays over there. They're having fun with each other sexually. That shouldn't be allowed, because that's something that they get to do and we don't get to do, right? So that's kind of silly, right? He also talks about religion. Now, he's not talking about every single religious point of view, but he is talking about people who think of God as a scary tyrant, right? He says it's almost as common for men to conceive of God as a being of worse than human malevolence. Malevolence is antipathy in their hearts. as to style him a being of infinite benevolence with their lips. So if you think that God is a scary, mean, arbitrary tyrant who doesn't want you to have any pleasures or is willing to let you have the pleasures of eating and drinking and sex so long as it's serving some purpose, but not because it's actually pleasurable, well, then you're going to think of pleasures as shameful or sinful, and you're not going to want to engage in them yourself, and you're not going to want other people to engage in them. So that's another motive. And then he talks about hatred of pleasure. And I think this is kind of similar to envy, because the discussion here talks about discovering a new sort of pleasure that other people haven't had before. He says Nero, or one of the other Roman tyrants, offered a reward to anybody who should discover a new pleasure. It doesn't work because we've pretty much figured out all the things that, at least in general, are pleasurable. But he says, if somebody did find a particular source of enjoyment in addition to the 5 or 6 senses we have at present, he would be hunted out of the world as a monster not fit to live, right? So some people just, they have a hatred for pleasure. And he actually talks about this much earlier in the introduction as, kind of a dominant motif for a lot of people. They're afraid of pleasure. They're they don't like it. And so some philosophies are that way. So that explains where this antipathy is coming from. It could be different sources. They might be mixed together as well and reinforce each other. Then the question is this antipathy, the fact that people do feel this, is this a just ground for punishment? And Bentham says no. And he says there's 2 good reasons why there should not be legal punishment, what he calls the political sanction for same-sex, male-male relationships, because those are the ones that get punished in the law. So one of these has to do with the fact that it's not from some sort of essential mischievousness or harm or damage to people, but rather just from prejudice, as he's going to say. It's only grounded on prejudice, so it could be reduced to such a measure as to be no longer painful by bringing into view the considerations which show it to be ill-grounded. If you show people that having, same-sex relationships or sexual intercourse is not hurting them in any way, and it's not taking anything away from them, well, then they can not feel antipathy towards it, right? So you could say at a certain point you become responsible for the antipathy that you feel as a rational agent. And he says that if the principle of utility were to be admitted as a sufficient reason here, well, then you wouldn't be punishing, right? The other is that the antipathy itself turns out to be a punishment that doesn't require legal or political punishment. He says that this antipathy, so long as it subsists, is a very galling punishment. You can think about, being shunned or not being allowed into certain parts of society or being passed over for jobs or promotions or, people saying mean things about you. Oh, look at those terrible gays. We don't like them. If you've already got that, there's no need for legal punishment. The person is already being punished. You can say, why do you want to punish with the mechanism of the laws? And here, what Bentham is actually talking about, there's formal terms for this. He's talking about antipathy being a matter of what he calls the social sanction, right, in society, as opposed to the political sanction. And he's saying if you've already got it as a social sanction, you probably don't need a political sanction. So the end of this is that really there isn't any good reason to be punishing from the motive of antipathy.